everybody, and welcome to Your Spiritual Best Friend on Spotify or wherever you guys are listening to the podcast. I am the host, Josh Sanchez, and the purpose of Your Spiritual Best Friend is to connect spirituality, mental health, and astrology all in one, because it's important for everyone to realize that we are all on our own spiritual journey at the end of the day. So the more we open up, the more we are able to connect with each other and grow as a collective society. So sit back and relax and enjoy Your Spiritual Best Friend. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. On today's episode, I got a chance to interview special guest Traci Hill. Traci is an energy alchemist, and our conversation, we really talk a lot about energy, the concept of energy. Traci got her master's degree in Kinesiology, but was also diagnosed with multiple scoliosis at the age of 25, and Traci talked a lot about the challenges of that and how it really affected her at first to be diagnosed with something, and that really started her own inner work for herself to discover her own past traumas, past lives trauma, and to really get in depth about how trauma can cause a lot of physical pain in our bodies. Traci has a very inspiring story, and we really get into that. I know we also mention a lot about the physicality of traumas, and I want you guys to think about that. Times in which you're stressed or random pains you guys have ever experienced. Think about, could that be related to the trauma you have experienced? That's something for you guys to just think deeper about. But me and Traci, we get into that and all that fun stuff. You can check out all of Traci's work, all of the energy work that she is doing, and all of that fun stuff by clicking in the links in the show description and give Traci a nice shout out. Traci also is an Aries with a Scorpio moon, so the Mars influence is full in her chart. But without further ado, here is my conversation with Traci. Hey everybody, and welcome to Your Spiritual Best Friend. I am your host, Josh Sanchez, and I'm here with a very special guest, Traci Hill. Traci, what's going on, and how are you feeling today?
I'm wonderful. Thank you, Josh. How are you?
You know, just super busy, graduate school, everything. It's just been running around, just pretty much school, work, internship. So it's been super busy. But how about yourself? How have you been?
Wonderful. So work, kids, work, 2 jobs. So work, work, kids. I'm actually back in school to get my PhD and running a retreat next week. And very busy.
Oh man, I could definitely feel how busy you are just from, you mentioned work, kids. You also mentioned you're doing a retreat, you're getting your PhD now. Wow. So I know that's definitely a lot of work.
Yeah, but it's all good though. It's all fantastic stuff.
Traci, I just want to say thank you for coming on the podcast. When it comes to our conversation, we're going to have just 3 parts, right? We're going to start with your life journey, talk about like relationships, and then end with some astrology talk. So for Traci, for my first question, just starting off the whole podcast, tell me a little bit about some things you're passionate for and some things that you really enjoy doing for your work.
All things energy. I love energy because energy is everything and it's everywhere. And someone told me, they're like, when you talk about it, you get like a rainbow aura around you. I'm like, cool. So, I was diagnosed with MS, and I can get into that later, but it was that forced me to have to figure out how to heal myself. And that was how my whole journey really started to take off. It started younger in a general sense, but I definitely it took off when I had to figure out, like, if the doctors can't help me, then I got to help myself. And so energy is where it's all at.
Okay, yeah. So what I'm hearing from you, Traci, is like when it comes to the concept of energy, right? That's something that you're very passionate towards. And I know you mentioned you were diagnosed with MS. If you can describe to me a little bit of that journey for you, like I can only imagine being diagnosed with MS. Like it could be intense, right? So describe to me that little bit of your journey, discovering that and learning to, overcome it and embrace it.
Well, I was finishing up getting my master's degree in kinesiology, and I had all kind of problems with my body. It just wasn't functioning anymore. And after 3 different neurologists and MRIs and spinal taps and all that, they told me, well, you have MS. And I didn't even really know what it was. I was like, what the heck is this? So I was kind of glad I had a diagnosis, but I wasn't devastated until one doctor told me, you'll be in a wheelchair the rest of your life if you don't take medication. And I was like, and I'm stubborn. You're going to find out in my chart, I'm stubborn. So I'm like, no. So I had to go on this journey of understanding really why me? Like, not so much in the victim mode, but like, why did this evolve from everything I've been through already? And so diving into the emotions, the energetics of emotions, and then going into past life experiences and karmic stuff and all of the accumulation of ancestral energies and emotions and the epigenetics, it's like, okay, well, that makes sense. And in that knowledge, in understanding that all that energy is, in my physical body and around my physical body, means that I can then control it, or at least help move it through so that I can heal. And that is how I ended up on this healing spiritual path that I've been on for a while now.
Well, Traci, first I want to say thank you for being so open and honest with sharing your experiences, because it can be hard, right? It can be a really challenge, it can be challenging to describe, like our own experiences, especially something, that, can cause some impact, right? And I can only imagine for you, to hear a doctor say that you're going to have to take medications or else you'll be in a wheelchair. Like that must have been something that was very, very intense to feel. And for someone to say, right, it's crazy how doctors can be really blunt sometimes, when it comes to the diagnosis and not really, considering like how you would feel towards that. Like, I don't know about you, but I know for myself, like I definitely would feel very stressed from that too. But it seems what I'm hearing from you is despite that, you were able to go on this spiritual journey, right? Where you were discovering energy, the concept of energy, and learning more about yourself and how certain parts of your body, right, are related to trauma. And also you mentioned past lives too. So although like this diagnosis did happen and that doctor, he probably should have thought a little bit more before speaking, right? This was a really good spiritual awakening call for you to grow. Am I getting that correctly?
You got that correctly. Yes. Yeah. And, this was back in 2000 when really internet was still, not that it was new, but there was only one really search platform. And there was, it was like you only had one way to look, and it was on Google, and you're doing the best you can, and there's still limited resources. And, going into the rabbit holes was like, you're going into the dark web. And it wasn't really even dark web, but, so it was a whole new world I was diving into. And, but once I made all the connections, it was like, oh, this is all so, not that it's simple, but the doctors they don't know everything, right? They used to tell moms to, smoke cigarettes when they were pregnant so they wouldn't gain weight. Science keeps evolving. So it was that understanding that helped me piece together my own experience up to that point so that I can now, again, just start to reverse or shift my sails to the right direction of
And I
healing.
know you mentioned in your last answer, Traci, just like how like you're shifting towards like that healing journey, right? And that healing process. So my just next question for you is, so let's say, let's go back to that time, right? Where you just get diagnosed, right? What's some advice that you would give to your younger self, about the journey you're about to embark on and realize?
Well, that's a good question. So I would definitely say like it's not a linear. I think that's the biggest misconcept is that once you start on the healing process, it's linear and is definitely far from that. Like you have so many ups and downs that you have to be patient with yourself and you have to realize that just like anything, we have our growth period and our hibernation period to allow for the growth. So, you learn something, you then have to implement it, or you find a healing path. Like, let's say you start to, drink more water is a very broad example, but you decide to drink more water, but now you have to allow that to flourish and you have to continue to drink more water and you can't keep adding in new things. So there's like these peaks and valleys, plateaus all through the healing journey, and to just be patient with it. Because I went through shadow, inner child work by myself because it wasn't really a thing. And that was a huge struggle. It took me longer than it should have because I didn't really know. And I was getting frustrated and I was, it's ugly anyways, but I felt like it was extra ugly because I didn't understand that just be patient and, do some work and then rest and then do some work and then rest. And whether that means energetic work or, whatever kind of work you're doing on yourself, you can't continue to go hardcore all the time because you'll just get too exhausted. And so telling myself like, just chill, don't try so hard and know that, yes, it's hard. And then when it feels too hard, then just back off a little bit and rest and then go ahead again and then rest. Because if you keep going too hard, it's too hard to recover from going too hard, right? And so giving yourself that rest gives yourself that room for growth.
Yeah, Traci, and I will say that is a really powerful realization that you discover within yourself, right? Because I think when we get on these journeys, right, we want to, like you mentioned, like that linear, like we think, oh, like we're just going to continue to go on this linear path. But with life, like you have your peaks and you have your valleys, right? And learning to be patient with yourself right along this way too, and rewarding yourself along the way too. And I know you mentioned like you're getting into like a lot of shadow work too, and to do that by yourself, like shadow work can be a very intense process, right? Because we're working with our shadows, the parts of ourselves, that we have masked, and put aside. And for you to try to do that alone, like that's definitely a very, intense. That can be very intense, right? So learning for you to realize, let me be patient with myself as I'm going through this. That's a really powerful realization. And I think listeners to this podcast also too, just realize as well, whatever journey we are on, right? Like there's going to be ebbs and flows, and learning to be patient with ourselves can really help us along the way. Cause we get so fixated right on this linear growth. Like we need to keep going that we can lose patience if that's our mindset, right? So I just wanted to give you props for realizing that. Now, I know you mentioned shadow work.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit of like that process for you. Are you doing shadow work for other people? Or are you, what the concept of shadow work, how has that been for you?
So my shadow work is done now, finally. As far as I can tell, there's always still work. So I'm not saying I'm done working, but the deep stuff, honestly, I had some past life stuff that has affected me in this lifetime. And so I'm 48 now. It wasn't until my low to mid 40s that stuff finally came up from past life that was really, really intense. And so that part I was okay with because I had finally understood, how this journey worked. But when I first started on inner child work, that shadow work, I didn't know what I was doing. And I just dove in because I literally didn't know where to look for it. Like, I didn't really know what it was. There wasn't a lot of information that I knew about. And so I kind of just dove all in and I found out some stuff, and it was really heavy. And so now that's what, for my clients, I do a much more gentler approach because honestly, I lost a lot of friendships, which probably would have happened anyways, but it was just so like I hit a brick wall. That's not fun. So I decided people need to really understand that this is it's transformative, but it's no joke. Like if you go the route I just went, it took me too long because I didn't know what I was doing. I kind of had to go back and forth a little bit. But two, it's like I did it alone, and you shouldn't really do it alone because it feels lonely, but it's not. And so when I help my clients now, that's why I call myself a subtle energy alchemist, because most people have, busy lives. They got families and work and all these other things, and they don't want to go through what I went through. But you shouldn't if you don't want to, which I call ripping off the Band-Aid because, so if you prefer to go a little more subtle and allow your body time to adjust to the shifting, that's my approach with my clients, so that they have support, but also still moving in the right direction.
Traci, and I know I like how you visualize what you're doing too. So I picture like this Band-Aid, right? Like we're going to rip off the Band-Aid and we're going to start here. Because I picture ripping off a Band-Aid, you start with the small wounds first, right? And then eventually it picks up. So my next question, just building off of your last answer, when it comes to like a typical, like a beginning stage session. So let's say you just got a new client, right? Tell me a little bit of the process as what are you going through with the client, to help them just go through and rip their Band-Aids, right? And go through some of those wounds.
Sure. So what I'm really good at is seeing patterns in people. And so I like to someone's always come to me because of some physical symptom. So maybe they have, constant low back pain. They need to lose weight. They, yada, 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 or the same trauma patterns. So constantly dating the wrong person, or always I'm doing air quotes, but bad luck, which there's no such thing as luck. So we look at these patterns that keep showing up over and over again. And it's almost predictable for my clients. And I think for anyone who's listening, it's oh, here we go again. This is going to happen again. And then sure enough, it does. And so part of that's just subconscious manifestation. But the other part is that you're stuck in this cycle. And I like to, break apart the cycle, and we go all the way back to the earliest memory of it. And then we discuss this earliest memory. And there's a bunch of different techniques I use depending on what it is and my client. But we go back into this early childhood memory and we reframe the whole experience and have a understanding of why and how it happened. So that's one aspect of what I do, but I also go in and remove trapped emotions from people. And the deeper emotions are usually ancestral because they're not your emotions. And oftentimes the cycles, let's say you have a phobia of something and there's literally no reason to have that phobia. It is 90% likely it's from an ancestor, and you're just getting their epigenetics, their cellular memory of that. And so I remove those out. Those are actually changing your DNA, and it's subtle, but it's significant. And I love doing that for people because they literally just shift. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, I'm a different person. I don't know how that happened, because we got that ancestor stuff out. You allowed me to release it, and we're good now. And so those are just some of the things. Like I look for the cycles, I look for the continual trappings that people fall into. And then I go in physically and we go in emotionally, mentally to help adjust those sails to head to your true north.
Okay, Traci, and I will say, I'm seeing how like a session is going, and I really like what you're doing because I've realized this too. I know this book I've read in school, like the body keeps the score, and it talks a lot about how it talks, and I could tell you've read it too. Like it talks a lot about how like trauma that we experience, it can be how physical it can be, right? And that was one of the things that really stuck out to me is like when clients come to you about like physical pain, and we don't really realize this, like that physical pain could be related to the trauma we've experienced when we were very young, or even, like ancestral trauma too. So as I was hearing you describe like what you would go through in the session stuff, that was something that really stood out to me. So man, trauma, it's crazy how it impacts us physically. How do you feel about how the physical impact?
So that is really how my whole journey started. So with my, what my thought was, if doctors don't know why you get MS and they don't have a cure for it, there's got to be a deeper meaning. And so I did do a deep dive into like bacteria, Lyme's disease, and parasites and candida and all these things. And yes, that's also valid. But deeper under that, it's like you're trying to find the root of 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 the cause. And so when you go really, really deep, the root of everything is an emotion. And most emotions are tied to some type of event that you're going to remember. And most of those events are trauma. And so you can get 62 generations worth of trauma, of emotions. And if you imagine that steamrolling down and down and down, generation after generation after generation, and you say, well, I have heart disease in my family. And I'll say, okay, let's see, what were the relationships like with your parents? And how was their relationship like with their parents? And I can tie that all the way back to probably just not getting the love you needed as a child. And so all of these things have patterns. And when you see the patterns, you go, oh, so simple. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's more complicated to help shift through it, but the idea is so simple and we're not taught this in school, but I'm glad you read that book because that's a fantastic book. If your audience has not read it, The Body Keeps the Score, it of course, much deeper explanation of what we're talking about today, but it's basically how your body will hold on to any of that trauma and it will manifest physically.
Definitely, Traci. And I just want to say again, I really appreciate your insight, and just really just like your experiences working with clients and also sharing your own personal story with you and how that realizing like the physical pain and getting into deep inner work, like when it comes to finding yourself, past traumas, and figuring out all the trauma you have experienced. So I really just appreciate your honesty for everything. Hey everyone, this episode is brought to you by Podcash as a collaboration between Racket and Stir. Podcash gave away over $100,000 to up-and-coming podcasters as a way to support insanely creative and inspiring podcasters. We know how difficult it can be to get a podcast off the ground and running, but with Podcash, it's a great way to get cash, and best of all, it's all free for your podcast. So if podcasting has been on your to-do list or you're already a podcaster, go to podcash.com to stay up to date with future podcast happenings. That's again, podcash.com, podcash.com. I hope to see your future podcast. We're going to take a little transition to relationships. I know in your last answer, you mentioned about how like relationships can cause a big impact in our lives. All it takes is that one person to shift us into that positive or negative direction. My first question for you, Traci, when it comes to relationships, what are some qualities that you have learned through your own inner work that you need from people?
Well, it's funny. I was just thinking about this the other day, and honestly, the qualities have to come from me first. So I have to really know who I am first. I just got engaged like 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about how there's no way we would have been ready because both of us had been working on ourselves so much. But now we've gotten to a space of our work has shifted us so much that we understand ourselves so well that coming into a relationship, and doesn't have to be romantic, any relationship, you really need to understand yourself really well. That if you don't, your relationships, there'll be tension, resentment, anger, fear, bitterness, jealousy. And it's a reflection of how you feel about yourself. And, I never would have admitted that in my 20s for sure. Like, oh no, I'm just, that person's, whatever. And really, I'm just jealous. Why? Because I don't feel good about myself. I had a lot of self-worth issues to work out. And so relationships really take 100% effort on your end to know who you are, because otherwise you don't set boundaries, or you don't speak your truth, or you get lash out at people. And that's not how you go into any kind of relationship. There should be 100% from both people, not a 50-50. And when you then encounter somebody new and you have really understood yourself, and this other person maybe doesn't, and they maybe say something mean to you or do something that would normally hurt you, you can actually step back and say, you know what, they're actually hurting, and it's okay. I can just go about my day. So for me, I just need honesty from people. And to be genuine, because I can immediately tell if someone's not genuine. And Josh, you are 100% authentically amazing. So going into relationships is really, really important, again, to know yourself first, because it's impossible to really let someone else into your world if you're not being authentically you and knowing where your space sits with your energy sits with their energy.
Yeah, and that's a great piece of advice, Traci, like knowing yourself, right, before even pursuing these relationships. And I know there definitely can be a lot of trauma, that can be involved as a possible explanation to why like people like jump into relationships so quickly, instead of like doing the inner work first. And that just leads just right to my next question, just building off of your last answer, because I know you've worked with clients and you've talked a lot about like relationship patterns, right? And how the trauma that we might have experienced could affect our relationships. How do you think the trauma that we have experienced, whether that's generational or in this current lifetime, how do you think that trauma has impacted us in relationships, if you get my question?
So you're asking like I think you kind of already alluded to it, but so if we've had trauma, like let's say our parents were getting a divorce and we're 5 years old and one of the parents leaves the relationship and you don't see that parent, that can feel like an abandonment issue. At 5 years old, you don't say those words. It feels like that subconsciously. So when you grow up, one pattern you'll see is that you'll cling onto relationships so that they don't leave you, because you're afraid that they're going to leave and you'll never see them again. And it's this need to hold on to something that, whether it works or isn't, you become clingy. Or you'll self-sabotage so that the relationship does not work out. And that way you can leave them and feel like you were in control of that relationship and how it ended up. And so, typically it goes one of those two ways. It's not a healthy way to live, because then you're not allowing yourself to love other people and other people to love you, because you're just holding on to something based on fear or anger or fear of abandonment, right? More specifically.
Okay, Traci, and I just want to say again, thank you for answering that question because I know it wasn't as clear. You answered it perfectly. I just wanted to know just like how, just like some examples, and I think you named it perfectly. Like the fear of abandonment. I know that's something I've had to learn through my relationship journey. So I definitely those two common themes, that you mentioned. Like obviously, there's so many more, but those two seem to be the big main ones, working with clients and stuff. And I've seen that too, working as a group counselor with some of my clients as well. So I just wanted to know for that question, and you answered it perfectly. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Of course. So now transitioning a little bit, I know we talked a lot about relationships and we talked a lot about your journey, which I really appreciate. Again, your openness and everything. When it comes to astrology, I wanted to just ask you just a couple questions about astrology, and then I'll give you the floor to share all the work that you have done and all that fun stuff. So, starting off the astrology part, I just want to know just how much you know about astrology overall. Do you know a little bit of it? Have you heard about astrology? What's your overall relationship with it?
I love it. I don't know if you read the book Immortality Key. Have you read that book?
I've heard about it. I've heard about it.
Okay. It is, I mean, I've been obsessed with astrology since I was little, but I will say that there is so much to understand that I would still call myself a novice for sure. But this book describes in research formats how the Vatican actually has used astrology. The Catholicism has used astrology since the dawn of time. And, there's a reason that 12 is a significant number. And, we have these numbers, right? So now I was just talking to my friend yesterday about north nodes and south nodes. And I looked those up yesterday and they don't actually resonate because I've been it was the one I was supposed to work on is something I've already been forever. So, but like the houses and all the, it's fascinating to me. Again, I don't fully understand it because it's like you can go to school for that, right? And so I'm so jealous of those that actually just like they can start spurting off stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, tell me more, But I'm definitely an Aries, if you're asking me. I'm 100% Aries, hence the stubbornness. And, I know my sign and I know like a couple other signs, but then to go into ones I don't know well, like Libras, I don't really know well. Yeah, I'm definitely a novice, if that helps.
Oh no, it's all good. I love asking that question just to see everyone's perspective on it. All the guests that come on, but one of the things that I see right away with your chart. So just starting from a very beginning stage, right? There's a thing called the big three, right? So it's your rising sign, sun sign, and moon sign. So your rising sign is the energy that you want to present to people. So it's like this is the energy that we strive towards. And for you, Traci, your rising is in Taurus. So although you are an Aries sun, the energy you want to present to people is a Taurus. So Tauruses are stubborn, right? Similar to Aries, but they do it in a more grounded way, right? So there's more discipline, structure, when it comes to the Taurus energy. But there is stubbornness because they are the bull, right? And you picture a bull, like a bull's very stubborn, right? So that's your rising sign. And then your sun sign is, like you said, like Aries. This is all about like the ego, right? What fuels us, right? And then the moon is also our inner world, right? So it's our emotions, right? And your moon, so you have an Aries sun and your moon is in Scorpio. So Scorpio is all about like the emotional intensity. So your sun and moon, though, one thing that's very interesting that I saw right away in your chart is they're both ruled depending on if you like traditional or modern astrology. If you stick to traditional astrology, Aries and Scorpio are ruled by the same planet, which is Mars. And Mars is all about the planet of physical action, getting stuff done. But the thing is, if that's your ruling planet, right, we got to learn groundedness, right? Because if we're so focused on doing things right, physical action, go, 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 that discipline is what comes a challenge for a lot of Aries and Scorpio placements. Now, in modern astrology, Scorpio is ruled by Pluto, and with Pluto, it might be a small planet, but it has a big impact on us. So it's all about transformation, rebirth, starting over, transformation, rebirth, starting over. So it's like a cycle, right? But as we're transforming, right, we're growing as people. So when I see your chart right away, I always like to start with the big three. And this website called thehoroscope.co. Let me know how you feel about this reading that I give. So this reading, it gives you positives, negatives, it gives you perfect partner and advice. So just let me know how you feel as I give you this reading. So you are an Aries sun with Scorpio moon, and it says a secretive personality. Confident and bold, the Aries sun Scorpio moon personality is one of a kind and will not follow what everyone else is doing. Positives for your sun and moon combination. Mysterious, fierce, and irresistible. Negatives can be cold and pessimistic at times. Perfect partner, someone who will be honest and straightforward with them. And word of advice, they need to be careful about their obsessions, especially those they exhibit in love. So as I give you your positives, negatives, perfect partner, and advice for your sun and moon, what are some thoughts that come to mind?
That's pretty spot on. So up until my late 30s, it was always go, 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 do. And I had been trying to meditate since I was like 30. And, it took me about 10 years to do 5 minutes of meditation. So I had a lot of work to do to get to the point of being able to do a lot more. So yes, trying to ground and root myself a little more into just my nature, the nature of who I am, has been a big challenge for me. There was one thing you said about what was one of the positives?
Oh, for the positives, it was like you have like a very it's like a very powerful energy. That's what I was trying to describe for the reading. It causes big impact,
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, there's like two pieces of me, right? There was the before the transformation and the after. So I'm a lot more grounded now, but I was definitely like this force that would just come in and make changes. I definitely go against the grain still. And it's not that I purposely go against the grain. It's just that I listen to my intuition, and I've been doing that my entire life. And so hence, part of that's, I guess, could be considered stubborn, but it's really just, I see my own path and I don't want to go with the rest of the crowd. I go my own way. I will go the opposite way, or, 100 people doing one thing and I'm that one person doing the other thing, because I just don't like to follow what everyone else is doing. So that 100% rings true too.
Of course, and this is one of the things that's really cool about the chart, right? So that was just like your first 3 placements. And then when I look at the rest of your chart, I see a lot of other things too. And another thing that really highlighted me when I saw your chart, and also now talking to you on this podcast, you mentioned a lot about doing the shadow work on your own, right? And tapping into learning about your ancestral trauma, right? And learning about past life trauma. So one of the things that stood out in your chart for me is your sun sign, which is Aries, right? It's in the 12th house, which is the 12th house involves anything spiritual. So it's anything beyond our 5 normal senses, right? And Chiron is it's an outer planet. The concept of Chiron is we all have core wounds, right? And we need to work on those core wounds in order for us to grow. Chiron is meant to help us, but we have to put in the work, to eventually evolve. And your sun sign and your Chiron are both in the same house, which involves the 12th house, and they're both in Aries. So Aries, right, when Aries are on, they're very big on self-confidence, right? They understand themselves, they know themselves, right? If you have a Chiron in Aries, that's something you're working towards, right? Is finding that self-awareness, self-confidence, finding that sense of purpose, right? So I can see in your chart, and definitely having this wonderful podcast with you, I've realized wow, like that's something that aspect is something that is very important in your chart, right? Because your sun is about your ego, right? Like, what am I going to get out of this, right? Like, what I'm going to strive towards. And Chiron is all about those core wounds. So for you, like, figuring out your core wounds has really helped you evolve and discover more things about yourself. So that was something I wanted to highlight right away when, as you were talking about core wounds and stuff, I was like, wow, like, yeah, the Chiron, that's your Chiron and your sun are working together here, but it took some time to get to that point.
Yeah, perfect. That's spot on. That's awesome.
I know. I was like, I could tell by your silence. I was like, okay.
Yeah, that's spot on. That sounds about right.
Yeah, and if you ever want to know more, I can always send you more information once we're done recording. But yeah, so I just wanted to highlight one last thing, and then we'll wrap up the full podcast. So we talked a lot about your Aries energy, right? And we talked a lot about your Scorpio energy. Another thing that really stands out to me is you have 3 Pisces placements. And so your Mercury, which is planet of communication, right? It's the messenger planet. Your Venus, which is like love language, right? The energy that we want to present in our relationships and the energy we want to look for in our relationships. And our Jupiter. Jupiter is the planet of like expansion. So you have all 3 of these in your 11th house. And the 11th house is all about like bigger community, right? Building like that sense of community, whether that's like your clients, or like expanding that sense of community, right? So you have 3 placements in the 11th house. And I was just wondering, when it comes to your own sense of like spiritual community, is that something that really drives you, to build more and stuff?
It's like almost made me cry. So I have this really big vision of having a community-based living where everyone just helps each other out. And it's not so much monetary, but it's, like an ashram, right? Where we all contribute. Everyone's got their quote unquote job, and we support each other 100%. And it's like, it's been so near and dear to me. I feel like maybe I've done that in a past life, or that's how I lived at some point. But that just like, I'm very emotional, like you talking about it. Like, oh my God, yeah, that's 100% true.
Of course. And I just want to say again, like, that's one of the things I really love about these readings, right? Is like, it's like another tool in the toolbox, right? To really help understand ourselves, right? And those were the things I saw right away, like that community. And like you said, like that is a great goal to have, right? Having a community, right? Where it doesn't really matter about the money, right? People are working towards helping each other, helping them grow emotionally, right? Because that's what we need to start teaching more, right? Is that emotional growth, right? That really helps us grow and learn new things about ourselves, right? So that's the powerful thing with with these readings, right? It's like another tool in the toolbox to help understand ourselves. But Traci, I just want to say thank you for your honesty. Thank you for wanting to share your chart and to tell your life story. I'm going to give you the floor for you now to share all the work that you do. Where can everybody check out your work and all of that fun stuff?
Thank you. Okay, so I have a 15-week coaching program, and you can find that. You can sign up for my emails and all my blogs and everything else at consciousevolution.coach. You can also find me on Facebook, Conscious Evolution Coach, and the same on TikTok, Conscious Evolution Coach. And if you know anyone with MS or any other autoimmune disease, I do have a private Facebook group with over 22,000 people in there. And that's Healing Multiple Sclerosis Naturally. Yeah, it took me a long time to get that up, but it's fantastic. I have a retreat coming up March 23rd. I will be having more of those. I also do energy scanning. I have a piece of technology that I'm holding up for Josh right now, but the technology can remotely scan you and see the emotions that are throwing you off balance and what physical symptoms it's causing. So I have that also. I do just emotional releasing sessions, and all of that can be found on my link tree in my emails, or you can go check out my website and sign up for the emails there and get the Linktree link there.
All right, Traci, and I'll make sure again, like once this podcast is out, I'll put all of the links that you mentioned in the show description, so that way you guys can check out all of Traci's work and all of that fun stuff. So Traci, like I said before, thank you for a wonderful interview, and thank you for all the work that you are doing. Keep up the great work, and please stay safe.
Thank you, Josh. It was great to be here.